הירח וידינו פרוסות כניש השמיים ורגלינו קלות קלות כאיילות אין אנחנו מספיקים להודות לך על אחת מאלף אלפי אלפים אין אנחנו מספיקים להודות לך על אחת מאלף אלפי אלפים ברוב ליבי פעמים הטובות שעשית עמנו ועם אבותינו שוננו רינה בשפתותינו שבח במרחבי הקיעה אין אנחנו מספיקים להודות לך על אחת אלפי אלפים אין אנחנו מספיקים להודות לך על אחת מאלף אלפי אלפים ברוב ליבי פעמים הטובות שעשית עמנו ועם אבותינו
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
And good evening. It's good to be together both here in person and with so many folks joining us online on this beautiful night together. And I want to welcome in particular anyone who is joining us for the first time. If this is your first time here in this space or your first time joining with Beth Am online, I want to introduce myself. I'm Rabbi Morrison, Jeremy Morrison. I'm surrounded by my excellent colleagues. This is Rabbi Heath Wadenmaker. This is Rabbi Sarah Weissman. This is Rabbi John Prosnett. And of course, this is Cantor Spall. So we're thrilled to be together here with you and with all of you online. And we are, I'd call us the madrichim, the guides for these next 24 hours or so of rituals, of these powerful rituals of Yom Kippur. And this, our Machzor, is our guidebook. If you are joining us online and if you do not have a Machzor, I want to urge you to splurge just a little bit. It's okay to spend a little money right now. It's about $10, I think, to buy a Machzor. You can buy our Machzor, an e-book version of our Machzor, through Amazon or through the CCR website. And if you received an email from us today with the links to this service, in that email contains links to the right places to get your hands on this book. You might need it over the next few hours. So, let us begin our trek together. A difficult day lies ahead, but one that holds the promise of rebirth and of renewal. And so now, let us take our first step on this journey by lighting the Ner Neshama, the flame of memory. Join us on page 9. Baruch atah Adonai, notea b'tochenu chayei olam.
Amen.
You are blessed, eternal one, who places within us life everlasting. And it's a pleasure to invite forward our colleagues, the education team of Beth Am, Sarah Lowing, good, and Alex Lyon, and why am I blanking? Lauren Bones. Forgive me, Lauren.
The human spirit is the lamp of God, searching out what lies within us. Guided by the flame of conscience, on this sacred night we search for truth. Shine your light upon us as we strive to serve you. May we find safety in your faithful love. We light the flame of healing and forgiveness. On this atonement night, we give thanks for love.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehecheyanu v'kiyemanu, v'higianu lazeman hazeh.
We continue now on page 17. In its emphasis on humility, Kol Nidre provides a corrective to the toxic certainties of polarized discourse. What if we approached each other with the humility to recognize that our most confident convictions will always be qualified by the limits of our own knowledge and understanding? In its haunting melody and strangely legalistic language, we begin to sense the twilight truth. Our high horses too often stumble, and our soapboxes stand on shaky ground. Kol Nidre grants us the gift of sacred uncertainty, the chance to begin this new year with a sense of what we do not know, rather than a narrow certainty about what we do. It's what Buddhists call beginner's mind. What if every time I were ready to proclaim some self-evident truth, I allowed Kol Nidre to whisper in my ear, "Says who?" We begin Kol Nidre with Max Brooks' setting, played by Donna Rudin and Russell Norman. And as you listen, I invite you to read the reflections, the meditations on pages 10 through 13. We continue now on page 16, and I would like to invite forward Dorothy Sachs to open the ark, and for any past president who is in our sanctuary to come forward now, and for all of you to please rise.
בשבעה של מעלה ובשבעה של מטה על דת המקום ועל דת הקהל אנו מתירים להתפלל עם העבריינים
Join with me on page 19, the second reading. Give us the strength to keep our promises, the sacred vows of partners in marriage, the promises of love and care between parents and children, the promises of duty between citizens and country, the oaths of doctors, the sacred trust of teachers. Give us the strength to keep our promises to our friends and colleagues, to those who live with us and depend on us, to those who work for us and those for whom we work, to those who pray with us and those for whom we pray, to those we love and those we serve. Give us the courage to keep our promises to ourselves, to one generation, and to future generations. V'nislach l'chol adat b'nei Yisrael, v'lager hagar b'tocham, ki l'chol ha'am bishgaga. All shall be forgiven, the entire community of Israel, and the stranger who lives in their midst, for all have gone astray. Moses prayed to God, as you have been faithful to this people ever since Egypt, please forgive their failings now, in keeping with your boundless love. And God responded, I forgive as you have asked.
We continue on page 26. Love beyond all time and space. Your love enfolds your people, Yisrael. We receive it in your teaching, your gift of Torah, sacred obligations, discipline, and law. So let us speak these teachings when we lie down and rise up, and find joy forever in your Torah and mitzvot. They are the very essence of our life, ours to ponder and study all our days. May we never lose or be unworthy of your love.
Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema.
Please be seated. Page 30. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha Vishinantam levanecha, vidibarta bam, vishivtecha bevetecha, uvlechtecha vaderech, uvshochbecha uvkumecha, ukshartam leot al yadecha, vehayu letotafot beinenecha. Uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru vasitem et kol mitzvotai vitem kedoshim leloechem ani Adonai Elohechem Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim lihiot lachem l'Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem Emet. Please turn to page 40. Witnesses to this heroic might, the people thanked and praised God by name, freely accepting the reign of heaven. Then Moses and Miriam and all Israel sang to you this song of utter joy. Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osei melech, malechutecha ruvanecha, bukei hayam lifnei Moshe, Ze'eli anu ve'yamiru Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed. V'ne'emar ki fada Adonai et Yaakov ugelo miyad chazak mimenu baruch ata Adonai gal Yisrael. On page 42, we pray our nighttime prayer, a prayer for peace and shelter and security. Hashkivenu. continue on page 45. For on this day atonement shall be made for you, to purify you from all your wrongs, and pure you shall be in the presence of Adonai.
Ki vayom hazeh yichaper aleichem l'taher etechem mikol chatoteichem lifnei Adonai
If you're able, I invite you to rise on page 46 for the standing prayer, Hatfilah. We're going to continue through the tefillah silently all the way to page 81. I invite you to explore the prayer book or explore your heart. Feel free to meditate on just one passage within this beautiful text. And when you're done with your private prayer, you may be seated. page 82. We begin the confession, the first confession of this Day of Atonement. Just an hour ago, we were with our 2- and 3-year-olds in Canterspall, had an amazing teaching, and she said when we put our fists on our heart, we're not beating ourselves, rather we're asking our heart to open. So I invite you to think of that as we turn to Ashan. Join with me. Our God and God of all generations, may our prayers reach your presence. And when we turn to you, do not be indifferent. Adonai, we are arrogant and stubborn, claiming to be blameless and free of sin. In truth, we have stumbled and strayed. We have done wrong. Join with me. Of these wrongs we are guilty. We betray, we steal, we scorn. We act perversely, we are cruel, we scheme, we are violent, we slander, we devise evil, we lie, we ridicule, we disobey, we abuse, we defy, we corrupt, we commit crimes, we are hostile, we are stubborn, we are immoral, we kill, we spoil, we go astray, we lead others astray. We continue the confession with the Vidui Rabbah on page 86. For these sins, our God, we ask forgiveness. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bizadon uvishgaga, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'dibur peh.
The ways we have wronged you deliberately and by mistake, and harm we have caused in your world through the words of our mouths. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha be'imutz halev, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'tifshut peh. The
ways we have wronged you by hardening our hearts, and harm we have caused in your world through careless speech. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chakachash uchazav, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chilut. The ways we have wronged you through lies and deceit, and harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'flilut, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'zilzul horim umorim.
The ways we have wronged you by judging others unfairly, and harm we have caused in your world through disrespect to parents and teachers. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'vidui peh, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chonaat re'ah. The ways we have wronged you through insincere apologies, and harm we have caused in your world, mistreating a friend or neighbor.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chozek yad, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'masar uv'matan. The ways we have wronged you through violence and abuse, and harm we have caused in your world through dishonesty in business. Page 98. Shema Kolenu, hear our call, Adonai our God. Show us compassion. Accept our prayer with love and goodwill.
La
With hope, Adonai, we await you. Surely you, Adonai, our God, you will answer.
Continue on page 114 with the words of Avinu Malkeinu. As I invite Mickey Miller up to open the ark, invite the congregation to rise if you're able.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Hamol aleinu. Ve'alol aleinu, v'tapeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kol Nidre
Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Please be seated. To prepare for this high holiday season, I read a book about teaching math. It was a surprisingly spiritual read. I say surprising because I feel a little anxiety, a little tension whenever the word math is mentioned. Now, perhaps some of you feel that too, and that's because many of us were traumatized by math when we were kids. Not by math per se, but by the teaching of math. Now, Yom Kippur is a day to express our vulnerabilities. It's a day to tell of our anxieties and to confront our traumas in the safety of our community. So, if you've ever said of yourself, "I'm not a math person," or if your math instruction left you feeling stupid and incapable of doing math, or if you've ever said to your children, "I was terrible at math in school," which, as I learned, you should never say to your children. Too late. If you feel scared to admit that you have trouble calculating percentages on your taxes or doing the tip on your bill after you have a fine meal at a restaurant, I have to say those percentages they now put at the bottom of that bill, that's a godsend. If any of these descriptions in any way apply to you, then you too were likely traumatized by the teaching of math. Now, God says in the book of Isaiah, "Let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Ki veiti beit tefillah yikareh lechol ha'amim. For my house is called a house of prayer for all peoples." So tonight, this is a house of prayer for all of us who were traumatized by math. But we are a big tent. You lucky souls who emerged from your math courses unscathed, even inspired, I welcome you into our house of prayer for all peoples. Pray with us, rejoice with us on this 10th day of repentance. Now, if only I had had Jo Boaler as my math teacher. She wrote the book that I read, Mathematical Mindsets. In it, Dr. Boaler describes the research of her Stanford colleague Carol Dweck. Dr. Dweck is perhaps best known for her findings that everyone has a mindset, a core belief about how we learn, a view that we adopt of ourselves that profoundly affects the ways in which we lead our lives. This mindset can determine whether you become the person you want to be and accomplish the things that you value. People with a growth mindset are those who believe that intelligence increases with hard work. As Dr. Dweck teaches, the passion for stretching yourself and sticking to it, even or especially when it's not going well, is the hallmark of the growth mindset. This is the mindset that allows people to thrive during some of the most challenging times in their lives. Those with growth mindsets embrace setbacks and learn from mistakes, whereas those with a fixed mindset believe that you can learn things, but you cannot change your basic level of intelligence, that your personality traits and your moral character are, in a word, fixed. Both mindsets are determined only a little bit by our genes. They are mostly products of environmental factors, of parenting, and of teaching. But it does seem that there's something strongly innate, something very innate about the growth mindset. Consider the infant learning to walk. She stands up from a crawl. She gets up and she toddles a little bit, and then she falls down, and she might hit her head. She might cry, but then she gets up and tries again with grit and often with a smile. How and when do many of us lose that intrinsic drive to embrace struggle, to seize opportunities to learn from falling down that lead to growth and change? It turns out that perhaps as early as when we were 5 years old, many of us were already receiving messages that we weren't that smart, that we should channel our energies in particular ways, that we didn't have a knack, a gift, at least in my case, for math. I've come very late to the language of a growth mindset. Not to having a growth mindset, but to the term growth mindset. I began hearing about it only after we arrived in California. If you are an educator or a better informed parent than I, perhaps all of this stuff about growth mindset feels like old hat. But maybe, as I did, you will find the more recent discoveries about the science behind a growth mindset, about the plasticity of our brains, mind-blowing. Crucially, for this sermon that I'm offering on Kol Nidre, neuroscientists have concluded our brains develop when we make mistakes. Every time we make a mistake, whether it is when doing math or in any pursuit of our lives, a synapse fires because mistakes challenge the mind. The brain has two potential responses when we make a mistake. The first is increased electrical activity when the brain experiences conflict between a correct response and an error. The second brain signal happens, however, only when there is awareness that an error has been made and conscious attention is paid to that error. It is this second signal that indicates a growth mindset. All of us respond with brain activity when we make mistakes. But having a growth mindset means that the brain is more likely to spark again. Individuals with a growth mindset have a greater awareness of errors than individuals with a fixed mindset. So they are more likely to go back and correct mistakes. Their brains spark twice. In a time of struggle, when we make a mistake, the mind is challenged. And this is the most productive time for our brains. It is when we develop new neural pathways. When we learn a new idea, as opposed to confirming something that we already know, we open a pathway in our minds. The more you grapple, the more deeply you learn, the stronger the pathway becomes. Consequently, the best way to learn is through making mistakes and correcting them. As a rabbi reading Professors Dweck and Bowler's work on mindsets, I kept thinking to myself, this fixed mindset thing, it doesn't sound very Jewish. It's not that Jews don't have fixed mindsets, many of us do, but our textual tradition does not know of a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is a foreign concept to Rabbinic Judaism, the Judaism that we continue to practice. The idea that we can't change our personality traits, that we don't learn from our mistakes, that we don't embrace struggle. A fixed mindset strikes me as profoundly not Jewish. Another way to put this in positive terms, a Jewish mindset is a growth mindset. Now, all of this learning prompts me to suggest we rename these days from Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur, that we call them Hayamim L'Yitzirat Maslulim Atzba'im Chadashim, or in English, the days to form new neural pathways. Now, admittedly, this name doesn't have a great ring to it. It's not very catchy. However, I would assert that this name is more motivational than the days of awe, or than Aseret Yamei Teshuvah, the 10 days of repentance. These are days for growth. Think of them as 10 days to promote brain health, for firing our synapses in order to strengthen neural pathways through learning from our mistakes. Since the first time I spoke from this bima, in February 2020, a month before the pandemic began, I have told you of my vision of a synagogue as a sanctuary for imperfect practice, a place for embracing struggle and for learning from our mistakes. In a sanctuary for imperfect practice, We sanctify our efforts to become the individuals who we aspire to be. It is a sanctuary in which we risk expressions of our vulnerability, a sheltered space where we strive and stumble and know that it will be okay. And within the safety of this sanctuary, we construct a collective vision of the world as it should be. We practice in here in order to effectively change the world out there. Because of what I learned in the lead up to tonight, I'm wondering if rather than calling my vision of a synagogue a sanctuary for imperfect practice, I should call it the temple of the growth mindset. But that's a little too new agey for me. I do worry, however, that as a synagogue, as a collective, we are at risk of losing our growth mindset and are in danger of becoming a community with a mindset that is fixed. The symptoms have been present for years, but they have been exacerbated by the trauma of the pandemic. Beth Am, like every healthy, functioning synagogue, is a microcosm of the world. Subjected to the same forces tearing the social fabric of America, we, dwelling in this house of the people, we have less patience, are less willing to compromise and to explore our differences, less receptive to new ideas and convinced of our righteousness. We engage in confirmation bias, the tendency to process new information in ways that are consistent with our pre-existing beliefs. We question facts and tell slander as truth. We are quick to judge, less willing to forgive. Like individuals with fixed mindsets, many of us have become fearful of trial and error, of change, and of admitting to and of learning from our mistakes. In her book, Dr. Bowler tells an anecdote of how one teacher has her students shed their years of math trauma, their fear of math, and approach math with a growth mindset that embraces the making of mistakes and teaches that struggle is positive. This exercise has such clear analogies to the high holidays and to Yom Kippur that I have to share it with you. At the beginning of each year, this teacher starts her class by asking students to crumple up a piece of paper and throw it at the whiteboard to let out their feelings, usually ones of frustration when they made a mistake in math. She then asks students to retrieve their papers and smooth them out and trace all the crumpled lines on the paper with colored markers, which represent their brain growth. The students were asked to keep the pieces of paper in their folders during the year as a reminder of the importance of mistakes. The papers look like this. Like those kids in their classroom, here we are, gathered together online or in person in this, our sanctuary for learning and growing. Over the next 24 hours, I invite you to join me as we shed together a year of fear and guilt, and to cultivate together a communal growth mindset through the rituals of Yom Kippur. Consider the Ashamnu, our public confession of our mistakes. The Ashamnu is a Jewish version of throwing a piece of crumpled paper as hard as we can against a whiteboard to remind ourselves that struggle is positive. And when we chant this list of transgressions, which we will continue to do repeatedly over the next day, something else happens. Our synapses fire as we recall our mistakes. The ritual provides the opportunity to strengthen pathways in our brains by learning from our errors and through dedicating ourselves to correcting them. Judaism labels this process teshuvah. Teshuvah, like a growth mindset, requires at least two sparks of the brain. One, of being conscious of missing the mark and of recalling our errors, and then two, of taking the steps to correct them. Here's a Talmudic story about God's growth mindset, which is to say it is a story of God engaging in teshuvah. It begins with this question. It's a good question. Does God pray? You betcha is the answer. Of course God prays. But how do we know? A rabbi asks. Another rabbi answers, well, God has a temple. It's in Jerusalem. And as it says in the book of Isaiah, in the verse with which I began this sermon, let them rejoice in my house of prayer, for my house is called a house of prayer for all peoples. See, the rabbi explains, God calls that temple in Jerusalem my house of prayer. So that's God's temple in which God prays. A rabbi then asks the follow-up question. Well, if God has a temple and in it God prays, what then is God's prayer? That's a great question. According to the story, this is God's prayer. May it be my will that my mercy will overcome my anger, and that my compassion, my rachamim, will prevail over my other attributes. And may I conduct myself toward my children, toward Israel, with the attribute of compassion, of rachamim. This is a remarkable depiction of God. The rabbis imagine that God pays conscious attention to God's mistakes. Aware of being overly judgmental, God seeks to control anger and to express greater compassion. It is as if God's brain sparks twice. The story then continues. One day, the high priest, Yishmael ben Elisha, enters the Holy of Holies, and there's God. God says to the high priest, Yishmael, my son, bless me. So Yishmael offers God the precise blessing for which God prays. He answers God's prayer and says, may it be your will that your mercy will overcome your anger, and that your compassion will prevail over your other attributes. And may you conduct yourself toward your children, toward Israel with the attribute of mercy, of rachamim. And when Yishmael had finished blessing God, God nodded and accepted Ishmael's blessing. I love this story. There's so much in it. But for our purposes tonight, here's a detail that will unlock more of its meaning. The high priest, Elisha, entered the Holy of Holies, where God prays, only once each year, on Yom Kippur. So this is a Yom Kippur story of God doing what we are doing today. In temple, on Yom Kippur, an imperfect God cultivates a growth mindset by engaging in teshuvah and seeks forgiveness from us. God and humans, we mirror each other on this day. As you may know, this is the final year of my first contract as senior rabbi of Beth-Am. As part of its renewal process, the board asked me to reflect on what I've learned about leadership from the past extremely challenging 2 years. That question fired my synapses, as I learned so much more from my mistakes than from my successes. Here is a little bit of what I told them. Every one of us who moves into this position, this happens for Rabbi Splock and Martyr too, we discover the true responsibility of wearing the mantle of senior rabbi. We learn and we grow. We imagine what it might be like, and then we discover its reality. Spending so much of my first year working on Zoom and in 2D and not 3, teaching Torah, offering sermons, and leading services with no one right there, where you are now, to give me instantaneous feedback. It took me longer to understand how each of my words and actions is weighed, scrutinized, to comprehend my authority and the influence or impact of my actions and my words. That if I disagree with a congregant, it can hurt them. That if we experience tension, I need to be the one to proactively address those tensions, to ameliorate relationships. Because there is another side to this mantle of leadership, another facet of this sacred responsibility that I truly did not understand before I began in this role. Because I am the senior rabbi, my words and actions have a greater capacity to soothe, to comfort, to mend, to heal than when I was an associate rabbi. Now, this might all seem peculiar to you because you met me as your senior rabbi. But the orientation to religious leadership that was imparted to me was about diminishing differences between rabbi and congregant, a paradigm of shared leadership and equality. I don't see myself as too different from you, and my self-perception and my orientation to religious practice is fundamentally non-hierarchical. But now, I understand so much more clearly that because of my position as senior rabbi, this is not how others perceive me, and I need to be more attuned to this difference in perceptions. I share these reflections for two reasons. First, part of being a Jew with a growth mindset is not only to embrace mistakes and struggle, but when necessary to also apologize for mistakes and seek forgiveness. Please know that I would never hurt any of you intentionally, but if I have hurt you, I apologize and I seek your forgiveness. Here's the second reason for sharing these thoughts on leadership. I and my family dwell in this sanctuary for imperfect practice with all of you. There is an incomplete, yet traditional understanding of teshuvah as a practice that leads to apology and to starting over with a clean slate. But that's not quite it. Teshuvah is not cyclical, not an eternal return to the same place. That's a fixed mindset, but an embrace of struggle, a willingness to change. By learning from mistakes, we begin not anew, but with new learning. To enter Beth Am, to dwell in this sanctuary for imperfect practice, is to be an active participant in the ever-unfolding project of Jewish communal life. It is to take a step every day along a lifelong path of teshuvah, of learning and growing. The pathways are as multitudinous as the individuals that have come into this house, each at our own pace, along individual and ever-intersecting pathways. Our goal is to walk together on an ever-upward spiral of communal living. And as we walk, together we work. And here, I mean work in the sacred sense. Our avodah, our sacred labor, is to react against the forces that are tearing apart our country and threaten the cohesion of our community. So let us begin this year with new learning and practice here better ways of being. At the end of that story of God's growth mindset, a story of how God engages in teshuvah and seeks our blessing on this day, the Talmud states that what we are to learn from that story is to not take the blessing of an ordinary person lightly. If God asks for and accepted a human's blessing, all the more so we must value the blessings that we offer each other. So on this Yom Kippur, as your senior rabbi and as an ordinary person, I offer these words of blessing. In this year of 5783, may we truly see each other in all of our dimensions and sanctify our efforts to become the individuals who we aspire to be. May our mercy, our rachamim, overcome our anger, so that our compassion for one another prevails over all our other attributes. And in this, our sanctuary within the world, in this community of nurture, in this place for reflection, learning, and growth, may we discover new pathways that lead us together to infuse a world so desperately in need with compassion, with justice, with peace. Ken yehi ratzon. May this be God's will. But even more, Ken yehi ritzonenu. May this be our will too.
We'll continue our service on page 116, the words of Aleinu L'Shabeach. If you're able, please rise.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol, לתת קדושה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא צמאנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Continue on page 120. We stand as one on this night of remembrance, united in grief, united in loss, united in the power of a promise. God has made us, God will sustain us. We give praise to this life and rise up together to renew our strength. As we turn to words of Mourner's Kaddish, our prayer of memory, on page 122, I invite you to call out the name of your loved one that you're remembering. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be a source of blessing. Page 122. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba, be'alma divra chirtei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayeichon u'v'yomeichon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevarach le'olam u'lalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudesha b'richu, le'ela u'le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. May the source of peace bestow peace on all who mourn, and may we be a source of comfort to all who are bereaved. And we say together, amen.
Those who sow in tears will reap in joy, will reap in joy. Those who sow in tears will reap in joy. Those who sow in tears may reap in joy, may reap in joy. Those who sow in tears will reap in joy.
Can be seated. A few announcements as we prepare for our departure. First, our tzedakah box this month, our October tzedakah box, it's October in case you weren't keeping track, is supporting climate resilient communities. CRC is a community-based organization dedicated to serving the underrepresented through empowering community voices to implement climate solutions that bring about unity and resilience. You can donate on our website, leave some cash in our tzedakah box, which is right in the foyer, or donate through Venmo. We're at Beth-Am. We hope you'll give generously to this important organization. Just to go over the schedule, some logistics for tomorrow morning. Our early service begins at 8:45. Our late service begins at 11:30. The family service at Mitchell Park is at 9:30. In the afternoon, we'll have two study sessions, a 1:30 and a 2:45. You can find a whole list of our session offerings on our website, betham.org/event/HHD 2022-YK study. Or, if you don't remember what I just said, there's a QR code that will be on the screen at the end of this service. You can just hold your phone up to that. It'll take you right to our website with all the offerings for the afternoon study sessions. Tomorrow's afternoon service begins at 4 o'clock, followed by Yisker around 5, our service of remembrance. And then Ne'ilah, our concluding service, starts somewhere around 6. Just a reminder that as you head back out to your cars tonight, if you're here in person, please be kind and patient with each other as you leave. And finally, hugs. We recognize that everyone is in a different place with their COVID precautions and concerns, so please, if you see somebody that you know and want to go in for a hug, just ask before you go in. And if you see someone you don't know, just introduce yourself and say hello, and maybe ask if they could use a hug or a handshake or an elbow bump. Just one more big thank you to our facilities crew as well, to all of our musicians who have joined us and just lifted our worship up this evening. And one final reminder, the High Holiday Food Drive is continuing. If you would like to bring a bag of canned food for Jewish Family and Children's Services, there are bins you'll see as you walk out. They'll be there in the morning and throughout the day tomorrow as well if you want to bring a donation as well. We'll conclude our service on page 127. Yehi ratzon milfanecha, Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Shetechadesh aleinu shana tova umetuka. Our God and God of our ancestors, eternal God of all generations, may your presence in our lives this new year renew our spirits and renew our strength. May it be a good year. May it be a sweet year.
L'shana tova tekatevu v'tichatemu. May you be inscribed and sealed for a good year. Have a good night, a safe drive, and as you leave, move with some alacrity towards your cars. Good night.
Where do we need the when are we meeting downstairs?
השיר על השם, כי גמל